Edo, welcome to the Right Mindset, and for joining me today. I know this is going to be exciting for me. I hope for you as well.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, 100%. And just for anyone who doesn't know, Edo van Belkom is an author that inspired me when I was younger, a wee teen as one. And it's funny because you reached out to me because of a video I did on one of the books that really got me going, especially in Dungeons and Dragons. I almost worked for TSR back in the day, and like I have a big connection to Lord Soth, and uh, I was I was happy to hear from you, but I felt bad because I was showing love in that video. That was like, and it was all about voice. The whole video was like, this is an author's voice, and this is how to write in your, like I was trying to show people how to develop
Well,
voice.
I appreciated the effort you made there, and I guess I reached out because the start of the book was a conscious choice that I had to make as the author about which way was things were going to go. I had a lot of choices to make when
Yeah,
writing that book, and the way I started was one of them. And yeah, to remember, I had to write something in someone else's universe. So it had a bunch of parameters and things that were
yeah.
important to the universe and things like that. So I wasn't able to freewheel. I had to be very conscious of playing in someone else's garden, making
Yeah.
sure I left all the flowers, the way they were.
Yeah, because of the historical background that's based on Soth and how like the cataclysm and all that. But to be fair, the prologue in that book, I don't know if anyone let me show the picture of that book real quick. This book is it's from the Warrior series. It's Lord Soth. And what I have to say about that prologue is fantastic. First of all, people don't know how to write prologues, and I always show them that prologue, believe it or not. I don't show them Lord of the Rings. I don't say, hey, exposition dump it. I go, it starts in movement, it's mystery, it's vague but informative. We're getting character, and then boom, it hits at the end, and we get to meet Lord Soth and his father in this like quaint little thing. It's a solid prologue.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I've heard a lot of professional writers and those teaching saying prologues are should be used judiciously. Not everything deserves a prologue. But the difficulty I had with that book is Soth was basically a villain, and this was
Yeah.
a book about him, so he had to be kind of like the hero.
Yeah.
So I figured out I'm going to make it all about the sins of the father. That as much as he wanted to be good and righteous and do the right thing, he was plagued by the sins of the father, and he was going to his destiny was secured. Like no matter
Yeah.
what he did to alter the course of his destiny, it was written, and it was inevitable. So that's what I went with, and I appreciate the kind words about the prologue.
Yeah, and you're saying it should be judicial. People just, oh, I wrote a book, I should have a prologue. But like the way that prologue sets up exactly what you're talking about, the sins of the father, and he is a villain. He is, I get it, but it's so good that you're saying the father is this piece of this POS, this piece of crap, and Lord Soth is trying to do right in the book. Every choice he makes, he just makes a small mistake, and it just becomes this big, uh, you
Yeah, and
know,
eventually he says, like, well, if I'm going to be evil, might as well go all in.
yeah, it definitely goes all in. Don't get me wrong. The end of that book also is just a nice, because for anyone who knows Lord Soth, the book you wrote is basically what leads him to become the Black Knight.
Yes,
And
yeah,
that last chapter not only is like, it's like a chef's kit, it just pulls it all together. It has a very emotional, I'm not going to give anything away, but it has an emotional touch to literally the battle within him, the thing he's struggling with the most, and he just falls into it. He just, as you're saying, he just accepts, this is what I am, then I'm going to be it, and I'm just going to embrace it. Then he sits down on that. Oh, so good.
before we go on, I'm just going to give you a little anecdote about how I was able to get this book.
Please. Yeah.
I was in contact with Brian Thompson at TSR before it became Wizards of the Coast. And I told him, I just finished a book for White Wolf Gaming. called Wormwolf, set in their world of darkness. And I said, I'm interested in doing some work also for TSR. And he wrote me back and said, when the book comes out, send a copy to me and we'll see what we can do. So I did. I sent him a copy of the book, and then he called me up and said, how are you with, doing high fantasy? And I said, oh yeah, I can do that. I love that stuff. And of course I had never done any beforehand, but my work as a freelance writer is like, I have to get work wherever I
Yeah.
can. So bullshitting him was like de rigueur. That's what you had to do. I said, oh yeah, I can do that. And he said, good, I want you to do the Lord Soth book. And I had no idea who this character was.
Yeah.
I said to some other friends who were in gaming, I said, oh, I'm going to do a book on Lord Soth. Have you heard of him? And they were dumbfounded, like, oh, you're going to do Lord Soth? Like, I can't believe it. So then they sent me all the material that referenced Soth at the time, which was the three large books by Weiss and Hickman.
Oh yes.
So I read those in like 10 days. And I read every other bit that they sent me and that I could find. And the funny thing is, critics say, oh, this was wrong and that was wrong. And I tried to be very clear with the opening saying from the librarian, saying this is the most complete I can do from all the references. And this was like what I was going through, really, right? I had to take this and this and this and put it all together, and people saying, oh, you got this wrong, you got that wrong. Well, it was vetted by TSR, before it was published. And, I'm sure they had their scholars go over it. And it was a terrific experience. I don't know at this point in my life I could do it again, but the brash young author who could take on any challenge and never fail at anything, that's what I was at the time. And here we are years later talking about this book, so I must have done something right.
You definitely did something right. I mean, I own like a new. I have worn that book out on more than one occasion where I had to get a new one, only because, for fans of D&D and Dragonlance and everything that has to do with Ravenloft and all that stuff, like those books have their time, and it's just a beautiful place and time where it was about character. It was about just these fun stories. They're not Lord of the Rings. They're not Game of Thrones, but they're these wonderful, like you're saying, high fantasy glimpses into these characters. Even the Hickman stuff. I love Hickman stuff. I love Weiss stuff. But at the end of the day, they're fun books. They're not meant to be,
Well, just to finish off this whole anecdote and storyline.
Please, yeah.
When I finished the Soth book, I'm eager to do more. And Brian Thompson threw me a bone, kind of. You do this Dragon Dice book. And they had a marketing technique where they were going to put a hole in the pages of the book, and you could buy it with a die inside, play with the game. So I did that, and they did publish one book in the series, but TSR had then sold the Wizards of the Coast, and Brian Thompson was gone. And I have a book, the cover of the book somewhere here, but the book was never published. And people are actually stealing the dies out of the books in the comic shops and stuff, and never mind buying the book. And because TSR was bought out by Wizards of the Coast, and Wizards of the Coast had their own dice game, one had to go, and the one that went was Dragon Dice. So that book was never published when it was supposed to be. And Brian Thompson was gone shortly after, and all that effort to get into there was gone too. I contributed to one anthology from Wizards of the Coast, but it was clear that I was kind of an intruder and not one of the editor's favorites. So that was my time with Dragonlance. It was fun, but it was short-lived.
Yeah, well, TSR did have like a really nice, because they were much more than Wizard of the Coast. there was more family friendly. They were willing to take chances on people. I know, like even Tony Diddlizzy, like I was close to him for a little bit back in when I was 18, way in a day. And when Wizards took over, working with them or dealing with them was a whole other ball game. It was very corporate. It was, even doing some of the cons for them. And you're saying it's right. They're just like, but they don't tell you right out. They just sort of like, we're going to leave you over here.
No, I had to struggle with this story. I think I wrote one that was ultimately rejected after about 3 or 4 revisions. And it was like, no, sorry. And I know if I was part of the fold, accommodation would have been made, but I just felt like I was being treated like the outsider. Who is this presumptuous guy to get this, choice title and then think that we want him to continue? So anyway, it's all water under the bridge now. I had my time, and it did very well. It was a bestseller in those gaming lists.
Yeah,
and it did very well, and I was quite pleased by it. But every good thing comes to an end, and it did.
Now, because you got to spend time with Lord Soth, did you ever read any of the books that came out afterwards to see if you had influenced the way they wrote the character?
No, I did not. I'm sorry, I did not. My whole thing was at the time getting on to the next thing and finding it was my full-time job. So I was like, I've got to find some books to write, and I ended up doing 2 books in the Deathland series for Harlequin Gold Eagle. Which they did ask me to do a 3rd one, but by that time I'd lost interest. But I just moved on to the next project and the next thing that I could do. So
yeah, but you're a big guy. You're like 6'3". Can't you just like strong arm your way into these comics?
I was 6 foot at one time. I think I've been shrunk down to 5'11". But if you think I'm 6'3", then yes, I am. I tower over people, I guess. But no.
Well, I'm just saying because I was reading the first story in this book. I just got it in the mail yesterday. Your Death Drives a Semi, the 25th anniversary of short stories and horrors, and it just says it inside there that I think you were 6'3" or something like that, or maybe 6 foot.
No, I never reached such heights.
But there's a great photo in it though. If you when you first wrote it, and then when your updated version, and
it was 25 years later. So the publisher, Mark Lefebvre, decided, what if we have a photo of it, like in the same kind of setup, and I'm still as handsome as I was, but not as much hair and a lot of white around the beard and stuff. But
because the photo is it the same kind of truck, or you're just sitting in like another white truck?
No, when we did the first truck, I went with my wife and we drove around industrial area of my town here in Brampton, and we found a truck shop, the repair shop, and I walked in. I said, this is going to sound crazy, but can I go sit in one of your trucks and so I can take a picture? And they kind of looked at me and said, yeah, just as long as the company name isn't in the photo. Okay, so I did. And then I just found a truck later on that I could sit in and do it, and for effect. But back in the day, anything to promote and any kind of angle, and it was my full-time job, and it was like my laser focus, doing the writing and making it succeed. And I did it for 12 years before I realized, there are easier ways to make a living. There are.
Now, what would be some advice to authors with that mindset, where there is easier ways to make some money?
Well, if you want to do this, you have to be absolutely certain it's what you want to do. I've taught writing classes and things like that all over, and what I tell the students: if I can give you feedback and dissuade you from being an author or wanting to become a professional writer or anything like that, if I can dissuade you, then it was never meant to be. And I was like that. Like, no way. Like, if someone thought I couldn't write, like, they don't know what they're talking about, because I can. And I, powered through that. And that sentiment that I'm giving now isn't something new. Harlan Ellison, started every one of his workshops with the same the same advice. And I think it's true because my life was a bullet focused on succeeding as a writer. I would have books in my pockets if I had 5 minutes
Yeah.
free time, I could read a book. I read everything I could about the writing, the art of writing, the rules of writing. And I spent 2 years as a part of a writing group called the Cecil Street Irregulars, where we met once a week and we critiqued 2 stories each week. And I would bring my stories quite often.
Yeah.
And from that group, myself emerged, Dave Nickel, Carl Schrader, and Cory Doctorow, although he was there later after I had left. He's made a name for himself. And a few others who had sold some short stories. And it was a very good group. A lot of people knew what they were talking about. And I eventually left that group because I didn't need their advice anymore. I was recognizing problems with my writing as I was writing them, because we dealt with them in the writing group. And it's a really good tool to have to critique someone with structure and reasoning and everything like that, because it's not enough to say, oh, this isn't very good. You have to say why it's good. And once you can do that, you recognize issues with your own writing before you even finish putting it down on paper and say, well, that's not right. And that's what I did. So I left that group, and then still keep in touch with a couple of people whose opinion I truly respect and admire, and have them look over. As a matter of fact, just this morning, I went over a story I'm writing with notes from my good friend Dave Nickel, which we wrote together, Rat Food, and won this Bram Stoker Award.
Oh, nice.
So, if you know somebody whose opinion you respect, stick with that person and know when you're making a mistake and identifying it, so you don't, put it on paper for everyone else to see.
And I love that you're saying that. One of the things, especially with my clients or a lot of the writers that watch the show, they struggle with, and I'm not obviously going to call out names, it's something that newer writers deal with too, mostly, but they struggle with recognizing when something's wrong, because how can it be wrong? I wrote it, like, it's good, but they also fall into but I write pretty prose, and you're like, but writing pretty has nothing to do with writing. Like, that's the easy stuff. It's what's behind it. What's the depth? Is it connecting? Is it cause and effect?
You say that, and it's all about choice. And in order to make a choice, you have to know what the rules are, and you have to decide when you're going to break them. The story that Dave read this morning, and he sent me the feedback, he was telling me the ending to it, what I'd left after what he thought was the ending, was just gilding on the lily. And I thought, yeah, probably, but it's such a delicious twist of the knife. I can't bear to not have it in there. And I'm deciding to leave it in there, and we'll see what happens.
Yes.
Dave is a more, not say serious or artistic writer than me. I'm a kind of a pulp writer, and this is a horror story, and let's just go for it and go a little bit over the top at the ending. And that's my choice to make, but I respect his opinion, and he's probably right. And I'm probably, doing something that's going to shoot myself in the foot. Maybe the editor says, you should cut this out. And then, okay, you got me. But for now, it's too much fun at the end of the story to cut out. So we'll see what happens.
That connects to the video of how we basically were introduced to each other, because, when you're a writer, and what you just said is so powerful. And I think anyone listening right now should really take heed to it, because you have to make choices as a writer, whether the editor gives you information or feedback or even beta readers. Sometimes the rule of cool is great, but also I am the author, and this is important to me. You got to make choices like that.
Well, the thing when we were in the writing group, you put it out there, and there's like 5 people. And if 4 out of the 5 all have a consensus and like, oh, pretty much they're probably right. If it's split down the middle, then you have a choice to make one way or the other. But it's funny, when we got out of that group, the moment came which was Rat Food, the story that won the Stoker Award. and we submitted it there. And one of the writers critiquing said, "Was this supposed to be horrific? It didn't scare me at all." And it was like, "Fuck you! This is a banger. This one's going to win, some prizes. This is a great story."
Yeah.
And I realized, like at some point, writers can be petty and vindictive and not
Yes.
worth my time. So that's when I decided to get out of the group and just go on my own, because I think I'd learned as much as I was going to learn from that group, and it was time to move on. But I do want to get to the part where, you gave that critique, and it made me look back in a book I'd written called
Excellent.
Writing Horror. And I thought, I dealt with story introductions, and I thought there was 5 of them, but at the time I could only remember 3. So I looked it up and I said, okay, I remember now. There's character, description, action, dialogue, and epistolary format, where you start with some kind of a letter.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, well, I made that decision to just start with description. And, it's one of those choices you make. How am I going to begin this? One of my favorite is by action or dialogue, like right in the middle of it, and you get sucked right in. But this was a kind of a different thing. It was like, let me show you something over here. Isn't that interesting to look at? And, this is something that once you go a little deeper in this, it's going to be really important. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, you made me look back on my past and said, I know I did that for a reason when I did it. And looking through the book, said, yeah, that's why.
But that goes to the point of the video itself. It was all about author voice, and you made the choice to be descriptive. And I even say that in the video, where I'm like, you have to make choices. I like to have more action. I like it to feel like we're moving through a character, or it's cinematic, because I come from screenwriting background. I had a full career in film. So, it was never, and it was absolutely never a judgment on your style. It was just showing people how we have to make choices when we are approaching our writing.
Yeah, I didn't take it as a judgment or a criticism. I just it made me think. That's all. And I think Lord Soth was and especially the beginning, was a solemn beginning, a solemn, start to the book, and then it goes, batshit crazy at the end. But let's start really slowly and solemn, and with reverence to the whole character and the whole world and everything like that. So that was my idea.
I mean, to be fair, as soon as the elven girl comes into the story, it starts getting pretty crazy. But
yeah, it doesn't take long.
Yeah. I actually have a question about just your process in general, because you were writing that as a hired gun. Did they ask you to outline, or did they give you outline notes that you sort of worked off of?
I don't remember. I don't think they did. I always outline everything. If I do a novel, I've got a 13-page outline with almost every scene that should be like, here's what something happens here, and this is what happens here. And I probably did that for Soth based on, because I really needed to know where I was going. I couldn't just start and say, well, let's see where it ends.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to happen. There was definitely an ending that had to happen, and I had to get there. So I don't recall if I did the outline and sent it to them and they said, okay, or if I just did it on my own. I would think that I might have sent an outline to Brian Thompson so he could just make sure that everything was on track. But definitely I started with an outline, because every time I saw a little nugget of information in some source material, put that in the book and make sure it appeared somewhere where people would recognize it, and it was part of the canon.
Yeah, because there's a lot of, again, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but there's a lot of big moments in that book that influence the far future, or, so that's why I was curious if they were like, hey, listen, when you write this, you need this to happen and you need this to happen, but how you get there, have fun, do what you got to do.
As much as I can remember, I don't remember a lot of input. Brian Thompson must have been out of his mind to trust me with the book, but it all worked out. So I guess he knew better than me even. So
That's fair. I mean, like when you work with people, you know, it is a relationship where you have to find your rhythm, and it's nice that you were kind of left alone, and they were just like, just send me your stuff so I could just review it, you know. But when they're over your shoulder, like, no, change that, no, change that, change that. You're like, why don't you just write the book?
I don't remember them looking over my shoulder or wanting updates or anything like
Yeah.
that. So I
So
was
that's
left to
good.
my own devices.
Have you since did that book lead to other opportunities where you were hired just strictly on the fact that you wrote that book, where they were like, hey, I would love you to write something for us?
That never happened. I did 2 novels for. That's another story. I did the first novel I did, Wormwolf, was supposed. They had a contract. White Wolf had a contract with Harper Prism to do a series of books set in the world of darkness. So I got one. I was lucky enough. An expansion of a story I'd sent them, sold to them, and my book was supposed to be number 4 in the series. And then they contact me and says, "Oh, somebody dropped the ball. They didn't miss their deadline. Can you have it ready in 2 months?" Like, okay, I guess so. So I started working on it, all day after dinner, as much as I could, and I got it in time, and it was the second book with an absolutely awful cover. It has nothing to do with anything that happened in the book, but it sold well enough, and they gave me another one to do, which was the better of the two. It was called Mr. Magic, and it was set in the gaming universe of Mage the Ascension.
Oh yeah.
And I did that book, and I have the galley proofs, I have the cover, and it was all set to go as a paperback, and then they canceled the line.
What's with these second books?
Yeah, I was killing books then. I was writing them and killing them at the time, which wasn't good for my psyche or my ego. And eventually they did publish the full novel in, what's it called? One of their compilation books. It's a massive book, like 600 or 700 pages, and 200 of them are my novel. The Quintessential World of Darkness, that's what it's called. And it was basically buried in there. It was published, I give it that, but it was buried in there. And I would have liked to seen it as a standalone paperback novel. I think it deserved to be. And I think, the fact that I stepped up and gave them what they wanted, when they needed it. But, it's all business, and probably cost them less to not publish the book than publish it at a loss, I guess.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do as a publisher.
Yeah, I understand that. But no, doing Lord Soth didn't create any further
opportunities,
contracts, or book sales. As I said, I was kind of an outsider there. And when PSR went to Wizards of the Coast, they had their own people there.
Yeah.
I would have loved to do a Ravenloft book or something like that, but
you would have been. I think you would have been really great with Ravenloft, because even just the tonality of, even though it ends with her ordering pizza, and by the way, I love pizza, so I was in, but like the tonality of it is it feels realistically dark, and that's what Ravenloft is good at. Like those books are always realistically dark.
You're making reference to the short story The Rug, which opens up Death Drives a Semi. That was for Robert Bloch's Psychos. And you have to remember who Robert Bloch was and the kind of writer he was and what he wrote. Always a blend of humor and horror together. And he had those kind of endings that were kind of humorous. And my whole thought was, as a matter of fact, when I was writing this story, like, how the hell am I going to end this? And then it came to me, and I thought, oh man, Robert Bloch is smiling down on me, and he's saying, this is exactly the way to end the book. End the story. And that story just in the last year has been made into a short film by Sean Cisterna. It's made the rounds. It was actually featured on CBC in the summer. They have a show called Short Film Face Off, where they have 9 short films and they all compete against each other. It didn't win, but it was on a national audience, and it's been making the rounds. And currently there's a documentary called Silver Screamers about the making of the rug, because the rug was made with a crew of senior citizens.
That's awesome.
Yeah, who don't like anything about horror, don't like horror movies or anything. And that documentary is making the rounds and has
Yeah.
been received quite well. So yeah, the rug.
Yeah. It was a good
My
opener.
homage to Robert Bloch, one of my favorite writers.
Yeah. Well, it definitely has a good feel to it, and the ending absolutely is one of those like, I like that. That was a good I like when she's counting the money. She's like, oh, this ain't too bad. And there's a dead body on the floor.
Well, there's more to that. If anyone doesn't know the story, it's about it was for Robert Bloch's Psychos, and my whole idea at the time was everyone's going to think that a psycho has to be a young, crazed man.
Yeah.
What if my mother was going through a bout with Alzheimer's at the time, and she could get quite violent towards my dad, her primary caregiver, at some points. So what if, not a young person at all, but an old person, and the psychotic behavior was the form of dementia? And I just went from there, and I started writing this story about this woman killing people and the rug eating them and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped and said, this is a stupid story. It's just silly. And why? And at the time, HWA came out with their newsletter, and they said, we don't have enough stories submitted to Robert Bloch's Psycho. So if you've written something and haven't finished it, finish it off and send it in. And the anecdote to that is Robert Bloch had passed away before the book was completed. And I had to think that this was Robert Bloch saying, Edo, you got to finish this story. This is like right up my alley. Please finish the story. So I did. Yeah. And good things happened after that.
Yeah, and it does. The character does have that sense of dementia, that like she's on the verge of like, because she's like present but not. She's like in her own little world, and it was just very good. It was very good. And there's an Italian in it. You can't go wrong with an Italian.
And the note, if your viewers here are into about writing and the lessons to be learned, the lesson here is to finish what you start.
Mm-hmm.
There's a famous line with some science fiction editor saying, how dare you reject a story for my magazine? It's up to me to reject the story to my magazine. So if you've started something, finish it and try it out on the world. You just never know what's going to happen to it. Don't count yourself short and stop. Finish what you've started.
Yeah, because something I've noticed, especially like in the community of writers and like more of the newer writers, they're always like trying to write to sell. They're like, I'm writing this because I want people to buy it. And it's like, if you don't write the things you want to read, the things that matter to you, there's not going to be substance in it for people to connect to. And if you're just trying to write just to get people to buy your book, then at some point you're going to be like, I'm not going to finish this because I don't think it'll sell. And you're making a great point where it's like, you didn't even think the story was good. You're like, this is stupid. And it ended, not only is it the opener for this book, but it's also, it turned into a short film. It has a documentary. People are still talking about it today. It's an homage to somebody that you respect. Like, it's a gift to the world,
Yeah, the thing I really wanted to be part of that book, because Robert Bloch, one of my favorite writers, one of my favorite short stories of his is called Enoch. And I just wanted to be part of it somehow. And I did meet him at a science fiction convention in London years before. And he was a delightful man. And he was always cracking jokes and things like that. Sort of like a lovable uncle that you wish you had. And you would always invite him for dinner because you would be the life of the party.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you meet your celebrity, like the people you respect, are there things you don't do to them because you have people come to you and they do certain things? Like, because I've always been interested in that dynamic, because I was very successful in the music industry when I was younger. So like when people came out to me, now I knew how I didn't want to respond to, like, if I met Dream Theater or like other people that I was friends with, like the way you meet your idols, like the people you look up to. Do you change your behavior because of how people come to you at conventions and stuff?
No, I'm always try to be professional, and you never know which person comes forward and, even surpasses you in their career or becomes a big name. I remember I met Richard Matheson. I never met Ray Bradbury. another one of my favorite writers. Richard Matheson I met. He was a little standoffish, but at that point in his life, maybe he's seen his fill of aspiring writers.
Yeah.
But other professionals were always very cordial to me. Joe Lansdale, Ed Gorman, Peter Straub, Gary Brandner, Richard Lehman, all just true professionals and very, the whole theory about paying it forward, they were all in on that. And I do my best to be professional and provide some kind of encouragement to people who approach me and ask for something. I'm always that way because you never know who that person will end up becoming. I remember science fiction writer Julie Trineda. I was a judge at a science fiction writing contest for a science fiction convention here in Toronto, and she finished second. And later I'm going, that was her? And, she's gone on to have a tremendous career as a science fiction writer. Yeah. And so you just never know at what stage your careers as ships will pass in the night. So always be professional and cordial to everybody. Absolutely. Never want a bad word to be said about you behind your back or, under your nose.
Yeah, you never know who someone knows or who someone is, and
you never know. You talk badly about somebody, the community is so small that somebody knows somebody and that's going to get back to the person eventually. So always be professional and cordial when you can.
Yeah, and this channel, I started up to, I basically aspire to inspire. I want people who have that itch or who have been writing or whatever the case is to realize that there is no one way to do it, that everybody has their own story, their own path, and that it is possible if you have a stupid idea or a grand idea of get those ideas out. And this is how you do it. You got to do the work. One of the things I say on the channel all the time is great writing is rewriting. And a lot of people are afraid to rewrite, like do the work, I did a first draft. It's good.
When I was editing the young adult anthologies, Be Afraid and Be Very Afraid, there was this woman who wrote this story for me. And it was like 9 pages long. And I worked very hard to cut it down to what it should be. And it ended up being 4 or 5 pages. I cut it almost in half. Yeah. She was kind of dismayed. She was happy to make the sale because the story made it into the book, but she was kind of dismayed that, that only that much of what she had written actually was necessary. Yeah. And I'm not sure that she published much more after that. Maybe it was a wake-up call. Maybe it was like disheartening to her. I don't know. But yeah, and a lot of times just because you wrote it doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah. And what you do write should service the narrative. And sometimes we write stuff where we start getting into our own head. We're like, oh, I kind of like the rambling. I like the, there's some attitude, but it's not doing anything. It's just fluff, and it's hard.
No one has ever accused me of rambling. I'm more of a point A to point B, the shortest route possible. But,
well, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Your writing definitely has it. Even that short story, the first short story, again, I got the book yesterday. So I read it, the first short story, but even that, like it, and I talk about you got to set up, you got to challenge, and then you got to resolve. And your setup basically establishes who this character is, and then the whole middle is about challenging that, and then you resolve it. You get to the end, and it all works. 1, 2, 3. It's very good.
When I often give talks on writing, one of the things they do is the 7-step story module, which I did not come up with. I credit it to Algis Budrys, a science fiction writer. But the 7-step story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning is a character in a context with a problem.
Yeah.
The middle is an attempt to solve that problem. Then the problem is far greater than first imagined. Mm-hmm. And more attempts are made to solve the problem. And then finally, it's resolved by victory or death. Death being failure. Yeah. But in Budrys's model, it's death. You're going to succeed or die trying. Yeah. But I modify that to you're going to succeed or fail somehow. And you could argue in The Rug that she succeeds but fails at the same time.
Well, yeah, because again, some writers, they don't know this, but your protagonist can lose at the end as long as they're,
Yes.
in some sort of a fluctual change. They have to.
Well, in every just dessert story, the protagonist gets his comeuppance at the end, so they fail ultimately. But that's a special kind of story.
And it's one of those stories that need to be told. So I think we're losing it nowadays. The modern writer doesn't really try things, I feel, and maybe that's just an opinion on the subject. But a lot of books are, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Like, do you feel modern books, not successful authors, not authors that are really out there, but like the modern book style is sort of like following a code, if that makes sense?
Well, I'll relate this story. When I was in university, Canadian University, I was studying creative writing, and we had a slew of canned lit. And I kind of broke down a canned lit short story by Margaret Lawrence or Margaret Atwood or any of those. It was basically a woman goes through life, her dismal, dull life, and then she has an epiphany about how wonderful her life really is, and then she goes on.
Yeah.
And to me, it made the instructor at the time smile, because to me it was boring. I love stories with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that's the way I write them. But there are, other ways of writing stories, and in order for you to succeed at them, you need to have levels of ability that are usually beyond mortal. The few have it and they can write that way.
Yeah.
But for us down in the trenches, I need to write a story with a beginning when there's a middle and when the end came. Sometimes these stories that we're reading at the time, ended and said, like, is that it? I guess that's the end of the story.
Is that Act 1?
Yeah, I almost feel like Salieri in Amadeus when he says to Mozart, "Oh, you should have a big bang at the end so people know it's over." And Mozart says, "Oh, you should give me some lessons on that." And I never knew if Mozart was probably condescending, but maybe part of him was saying, yeah, maybe I could learn a little bit about endings and going out with a bang.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I feel like Salieri being the one, and writers have this fear all the time. Like, yes, I'm Salieri. I'm just good enough to have a modicum of success, to be able to recognize greatness when I see it, but unable to emulate it in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And, it's okay to feel that. It's okay to know your lane, your niche and things like that. But going through university, I often felt that, why are these people being revered when, there's such uncertainty about their stories? So I decided to do it differently.
And that's the thing. Like, you have to put your voice out there. You have to put, what is the stories you want to write? What is it that's interesting to you? And that adds a little bit to the collage of narration, and like even Stephen King, like no one can debate that he's not a great writer. No one could debate that his books aren't good. Like we can't say he's bad, but like we can say, I maybe don't like reading his books. Like somebody can have that opinion and it's valid,
When when I was first starting my journey, I was reading all the writers I could, and Stephen King was, about 10, 12 books into his career by then, and he was gaining, popularity and status. And so I read his short story collections, Night Shift and Skeleton Crew. And I remember, reading and saying to my wife, whatever this guy's getting in recognition and reward, he deserves it, because he's just a fantastic writer. Just envy and respect and a sense of awe, saying, wow, I wish I could be that good. And you have to aspire to that, be that good, not just say, well, I'm going to write whatever I want. You have to know what's possible and do your best to try and achieve that. And I'll never read The Stand, I'll
Yeah.
never read the Tommy Knockers. If it's like 400 or 500 pages, I'm just not there. That's not my thing. But I love all his short stories. I read some of the shorter novels, and total respect for the man and his work.
Yeah. When he kind of like isolates it to those shorter stories, I think his writing's a lot stronger. Again, I'm not saying his writing is poor in any sense of the word, but I'm saying like when it's just like let's get to the point, I think he flies through it a lot smoother. Personally.
Far be it from me to criticize and say you should have done something different.
Yeah.
Just saying this is the stuff that I truly appreciate. This is the stuff that I'll leave to someone else
Yeah.
to find what they want to find in it. And across the board, you can't say that anything is bad because
Correct. Yeah. That's my point. Like it's just where do we, like you're saying, you like his shorter stories. You're never going to read Stand. Doesn't mean the Stand is bad.
well, I will say this. When I had a story in Shock Rock 2,
Yeah.
which was edited by Jeff Gelb,
Hmm.
and the first Shock Rock had a story by Stephen King in it. And I had read the first Shock Rock, and I said to Jeff in an email, I said, that story, it goes on for a long time and never goes anywhere. And he even admitted, yeah, it's not one of his best stories.
Mm-hmm.
So, at some point, Stephen King is going to get his flowers for being Stephen King. And, not everything he writes is actually, solid gold, but
Yeah.
you have to admire, where what he's achieved and where he is. And,
Yeah.
so what if maybe not his best effort gets put in that book? It sold quite a number. And there was a second book, which I was able to sell a story to. So it couldn't be all that bad.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. If you just say you're releasing a book and it automatically sells 2 million copies, you might have a connection with the audience somewhere, before it releases.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, you were saying something earlier about how you read his stuff when you were younger and you aspired to basically find your place. What is it you discovered in yourself as a writer that got you to, if you feel you've reached that spot, or
Well, I've reached the heights occasionally. I've written about 250 stories. I'd say about 10 of them are really good, and they're in that echelon.
Yeah.
But what I learned when I started, I wanted to write science fiction because I wanted to write like Ray Bradbury. It took me a while to realize Ray Bradbury isn't writing science fiction. He's writing fantasy with some of the tropes of science fiction, but he doesn't need to know how the rocket works for it to get them to Mars, that sort of thing. So eventually I realized that I was writing best when I wrote about things in the present day with just a touch of supernatural or fantasy element to it. So The Rug, an old lady struggling to survive. She finds a rug that takes care of her problems, and that's the story. Those kind of things. So once I found that niche, I explored it and I concentrated on it. And the thing about writing is, once you're good at something, the easier it is. The easier it is, and you're good at it, the more you want to do it. The more you do it, the better, the easier it gets, and the better you get at it. And it's like this circle that goes around and around. So when I found that, then I realized, oh yeah, that's my thing. Lord Soth aside, I didn't really delve into high fantasy. I did a few stories here and there, just because I came up with ideas, but it wasn't my thing. The thing was horror or crime or suspense stories set in the present day with just a hint of supernatural or fantasy to it. And that's what I decided I was going to do. Oh, and let's have a kind of a twist ending to it. I got kind of well known for having twist endings. Brian Hopkins, a writer, one time told me, "You write these 3,000 word, perfect 3,000 word stories with twist endings. How do you do it?" I don't know. It's just the way I write a story and the way I think they should end.
Now, when you get to the end of the story, though, you're like, how do I make a twist? Or does the twist just naturally play itself out?
I've come to think I don't consciously say I'm going to have a twist. It's just my sensibilities and my
Mm.
persona and my personality and my cynicism and my sarcasm and my dry wit that when I get to the end, that's the way I think stories should end. And
Yeah.
I worked very hard to come up with the endings the way they are. Matter of fact, this story that I was just talking about working on today, I've been thinking about it for 2 months
Hmm.
and it never came sort of worked out. And like just last week, I came to the realization of how it should end. And then I wrote it. And even then, how do I end this? And then I came up, yeah, that's good. And that's all the stuff Dave says is gilding on the lily. But I just find it, that's the kind of story I write. And I'm going to leave it in there and see what happens. But I
Yeah.
think it's just a personality, the kind of person you are.
Hmm.
Do I go out of my way to find a twist ending? No, they just kind of come to me, and
And there it is.
I'm grateful for it.
Speaking of twist endings, you worked on this project. You're a writer on this, correct? And
I was not.
oh, you weren't. You were
Uh,
just basing off your works.
yeah, I'll tell you the story. I know we're coming up to an hour, but it's a pretty good
Hmm.
story,
Yeah,
and
go
it's
for
good
it.
for people who are interested in writing and think, I'd love to be part of something in a television series. Well, the original Wolfpack book was published in 2006.
Okay.
It won the Silver Birch Award. It won the Aurora Award. So it was a pretty good book. And at the time, there were two people that came around looking for television rights for it. One had been a associate producer on the Survivor television series. So you're thinking, oh, that's great. He's got juice. He's a real guy. Another one came around and said they had a development deal with Paramount Pictures.
Mm.
Fantastic. This is for real. And then nothing
No.
happened. Nothing. Not a word, not a sniff, not an email, nothing. And that happened many times in my career. People are interested in something, and then I say, okay, contact my agent. Nothing
Nothing.
happens. So fast forward almost 16 years, and I'm sitting at the table. My wife's making dinner. Get an email from my agent. Someone's interested in the TV rights to Wolfpack.
Yeah.
And I go, they're out of their mind. The book's out of print 16 years or 10 years, 12 years, whatever it was. And, but okay, we'll entertain it. Within 2 weeks, we had a contract, which
Oh,
is
great.
light speed for these kind of things.
Yeah.
And my agent at the time said, something's fishy about this. I don't know what, but things don't usually work this quickly. Within 6 months, there was a press release about this new series coming from Jeff Davis and a Teen Wolf movie by Jeff Davis as well. And I didn't
Yeah.
know who he was at the time. And I'm thinking, well, that's interesting. And they sent it to me to approve the press release. And I'm thinking, why are they doing that? And even though all the emails had CBS Viacom attached to them, I thought,
Oh
what is
yeah.
going on here? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
sure, whatever. This sounds great. 4 days later, they released this teaser trailer, and there it was. Also coming in 2022, a brand new series from Jeff Davis based on the acclaimed books by Edo van Belkom.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy shit, this is
It's
really
already
going to
filmed.
happen. And even at the time, I think, are they out of their mind? The acclaimed books, they're out of print, but
Yeah.
this is Hollywood just giving it the old treatment. And within like 4 or 5 months, they were shooting.
Yeah.
Like,
Wow.
holy shit. And 6 months after that teaser trailer came out, we were in Atlanta on the set. And 6 months after that, we were in Los Angeles for the premiere, which is light speed
Yeah.
for these kind of things and never happens.
Mhm.
Turns out somebody might have been the guy who originally approached me from Paramount Studios with the development deal, presented the book to Jeff Davis, said, Jeff, would you like to do another werewolf series? He said, we have the rights to this book. And he read it and said, yeah, I can do this, sure. But they didn't have the rights to the book. So they had started Jeff on this journey, but they didn't have the rights to it. So they needed the rights rather quickly, which is why everything was moving so quickly. And, if we had known that they had done that, we would have had some leverage and we could have been put the screws to them or held out for something more. But we didn't know that. So, we signed the option and everything flowed from there. I tried in the contract to negotiate. If it goes into a second season, I'd be able to write an episode, which nothing happened, or any effort to do anything along those lines was met with silence and zero. And it went through a season, 8 episodes, and it was renewed. It was success by all measure, and it was renewed, greenlit for season 2. But then there was a writer's strike, and then there was a actor's strike, and late in 2023, they finally greenlit it. They'd sent out the contracts to all the actors, and then a week later it was canceled, which was disheartening to me because I was supposed to have a cameo. And I told Jeff Davis that I want to be killed so I can be on set one day and then have to come back the next day for all the dead makeup and everything. And he said, "Oh, this is going to be great." And I was so looking forward to it, and then it just got canceled. But I had the opportunity. I mean, I say this quite often. Who gets to go to their wife and say, "How would you like to walk down the red carpet with me in Los Angeles for the premiere?" You never
better than renewing your vows.
I had that. It was an awesome experience. I had it happen. I used to say that it was like getting struck by lightning and winning the lottery all in the same day. But family and friends said, "No, don't say that because it discounts the fact that you wrote a really good book." And I sometimes end up on these panels about how to get your work in front of producers, and all these people are saying, "Oh, you got to pitch them in this and that." And I said, "I have no idea what you have to do. You have to write a really good book or a really good story, and people come to you like 16 years later and they still remember it." And this is very unpopular with all these people who are, getting audiences with producers, because producers' jobs is to say no. They're going to say no to 100 projects before they greenlight one. So their job is to say no more often than say yes. And I remember one of them said, because I have never been able to speak to Jeff Davis for more than 5 minutes. I mean, we consider ourselves friends, but he's always so busy. He's doing this and that. He's running the show, and everyone wants an ear. And somebody said, "Oh, you know what you have to do? You have to offer to take him out to lunch." And I thought, are you crazy? Him taking him out to lunch, like that's a big special thing in his life.
Pauses
He's being romanced and wooed by all kinds of people. I'm going to take him out to lunch. He's going to be looking at his watch. When's this over? So I did. I offered Jeff. I said, "If your work ever takes you to Toronto, I will pick you up at the airport and drive you to wherever you have to be." And that way we can have a half hour of time, and I can ask him all the questions that I haven't been able to ask him up until now. But sadly, all that opportunity has passed. But I had the opportunity. I did it. I experienced it. And what I learned is Hollywood doesn't give a shit about the guy who wrote the source material.
That is true.
They care about the guy writing the screenplay. They care about the guy producing it and everything else. And I was showing up on set. People are like, "Who is this guy? Who are you?"
Who are you?
I'm Edo van Belkom. I'm the guy who wrote the book. Oh, pleased to meet you. But Hollywood really doesn't care. I remember at the premiere, I got out of the limo because we each had a limo. My wife and I had our own dedicated limo, which was great. Got out, and everyone was looking at us, expecting a star or somebody with some power. And we walked out and said, "Oh, who are you?" And I said, "I'm the guy who wrote the book." "Oh." And then we walked towards the red carpet, and a woman there said, excuse me, this is for red carpet people." I said, "I'm going to walk down the red carpet." I said, "Oh, what's your name?" And I said, "Edo van Belkom. I wrote the book." And she went down her iPad or whatever it was. "Oh, your name is here. Go right ahead." And they're like, yeah, no one really cares. No one knows. But it was an experience I enjoyed thoroughly. I wish I could experience it again, but at least I had the opportunity to do it one time.
Yeah. And it's a wonderful experience, like you're saying. And, not everyone gets to experience it. So just the fact that you got to do it is magical. I know we're hitting the hour and I know you got to go, but I always ask every guest the same exact question every single time. So Here it is. I'm going to read it out, put it on the screen for everyone else. What is one piece of advice you discovered about writing that completely changed the way you approach the writing process?
Wow. I think the realization that everything you write isn't great or not necessarily good, that it can be that way, but the moment it leaves your pen or you typed it on the screen doesn't mean it's there forever, and it can always be improved, and you should be striving to improve it every way you can. I mean, I've written countless stories, and even this one I just finished. I love the fact that I can read it through 4, 5, 10 times and change this or that. This sounds better. Say it out loud. This is a little better. Always improving. At some point, you get sick of it and just say, I don't care what happens to it now. I'm done with it. Send it on its way. But always remember that everything can be improved. And just because you wrote it doesn't mean it's good, but it can be eventually.
That's really great advice. Thank you for that. Edo van Belkom, thank you so much for being a guest on The Right Mindset. A true honor, I assure you.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. And if it's any indication of how well it went, the hours seemed to fly by. And I wasn't even, cognizant of the time. So I'm happy to, relay any nuggets of wisdom I can. And hopefully your viewership appreciates and acts upon it and takes it to heart.
Well, I definitely would like to have you come back during the next season, and if we could get you, to talk a little bit more shop, that would be great. And other than that, please keep me in touch with your book coming out, and I'll obviously push it on my social media for you. I'll do whatever I can. I respect you as an author, and I'd really like to do that.
I appreciate that. Keep me on your contact list. I'd love to do this again.
All right. Sounds good. To everyone out there, I'm Thomas J. Bellezza. And as always, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye.